expect complex communication, and the bears have it. Squirty in this picture is opening and closing her mouth, expelling the moist air out of her lung to read aromatic communication on the airwaves. One of the things I discovered about the black bear was that they had an accessory organ to their vomeronasal system, and that allowed them to read light molecules or aromatic compounds. I first discovered this by raising my first set of cubs, and I noticed that all the green vegetation that they came across, they'd hold in their mouth for a few seconds and release. They wouldn't damage the leaves at all, so I knew they weren't chewing it or tasting it. And I wondered what was going on, so I put the same leaves, and I had a couple of Brittany Spaniels at the time, and I put the leaves in their mouths, and they weren't very impressed. I put the leaves in my own mouth, and no bells and whistles went off, so I suspected that the bears had some kind of organ. I contacted the local conservation officer and got the head of a roadkill bear. I did some rather crude dissection and found that in the vomer, which is a V-shaped bone, there was a pocket and a large fleshy organ in the pocket. In later work with it, I discovered that there's a sensory nerve that goes from that fleshy organ down to the roof of the mouth, and that this was connected to the vomeronasal system. And on top of that, there was a bundle of about 6 or 8 sensory nerves that went up the vomer, underneath the brain, and spread out across the roof of the throat. So that any scent that they were taking in through their nose or mouth would pass over these sensory nerves from the vomeronasal system. And by holding the leaf in the mouth, they were able to determine whether plants were edible or not. I documented that they identified 125 food items that first summer and disregarded many more. And this gives credence to the Native Americans who gave the bears credit. They observed the bears to find out what plants could be used for foods and pharmaceuticals. And so medicines like aspirin, which we learned from the Indians, probably originated by somebody observing the bear to see if the will was safe to eat. Bears have emotional expression, which is honest. Social animals need to be able to communicate honestly with each other. Facial expressions come from our central nervous system, so they reflect what our mood is at the time. Humans have the most complex facial expressions of any animal on Earth. We have over 3,000 muscles in our face devoted to expression. We wouldn't be able to meet in this room and if we weren't comfortable with the emotional state of everybody else in this room. And that's written all over our face. Right now, everybody in this room has a neutral look on their face, something I call subway face. You get on a subway anywhere in the world, you'll see that expression. And as I say, it communicates honestly what people are up to. A year ago, when the Boston bombing took place, they caught the perpetrators by reviewing video that people had taken, and they were looking for expressions that were out of place. And they caught these 2 guys trying to walk off casually while everybody else was horrified. And that's how they caught them. They weren't able to mask what they were doing. In this picture, Squirty has just put one of her cubs up a tree during weaning time. She's aggravated. You can see she has eyebrow expression, eye expression, general facial expression, and ear expression. Her ears are like a horse when she's aggravated. They're pinned all the way back, and she has many positions in between. And here's Squirty with a happy face. I hear a lot of bear stories, and I often ask people what the bear looked like, and the answer I always get is black. Well, bears, our language is a mixture of emotion and intention. So our language is an emotional utterance with a mechanical manipulation of our lips, teeth, tongue, and larynx. So we can lie with our words, but if you want to determine if somebody's telling the truth or not, you read his body language, his facial expression, and all the other mannerisms about it. Most animals, scientists believe most animals communicate with emotions, that is, they cry out and others hear them. But bears also communicate with intention. And when bears communicate with intention, they mechanically generate sounds and actions. So now they chomp their teeth, they huff, they swat, they false charge, and they make that guttural sound that the two bears were doing early on, that ho 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 ho. The meaning of these sounds and actions is based on the context of the situation at the time. So even though they have a limited number of ways of communicating, they're able to broaden it tremendously by context. And as an example, if you were walking on a hiking trail and you came across a sow with cubs, and the cubs were already up a tree, you were out for a stroll, she was out for a stroll, but she thinks you might attack her. So she false charges you. She rushes at you, swats the ground, expels a big blast of air, scares you half to death. And all she's trying to do is to delay confrontation long enough for communication to take place. The average, if you meet a bear on a trail like that, I'll take a little diversion here. If you meet a bear on a trail like that, you want to hold your position, keep your eyes on the bear, and talk softly to it. And basically, bears are the only animal that I'm aware of that can read our emotional communication and act accordingly. Most other animals simply flee. So by controlling your own emotions, you can control the bear's behavior. And by standing tall, you want to always be dominant in a situation like that, because animals that are fearful of you want to dominate their fear. You want to talk softly to let the animal know that you're not a threat. And the bear may circle you, and if the bear circles you, all it wants to know is who you are. It wants to smell your back trail. I've been in this situation more than 30 times with bears that I've known and that are unknown to me. And I've been false charged and circled, and the bear comes back and determines I'm not a threat, and then I've spent 2.5 hours filming them with the bear paying no more attention to me at that point. The bear will typically make its mind up that you're not a threat in less than 10 minutes, and will simply walk away. At that point, you can walk away with no further jeopardy. If you're working at a restaurant and you're carrying a pail of food scraps out to the dumpster, and the bear false charges you, he simply wants you to drop the pail of food scraps before you put it in the dumpster. I was with Sporty one afternoon on Lambert Ridge in Lyme. It was a beautiful sunny day, and this thunderhead came rumbling up the valley. Sporty false charged the thunderhead. Believe it or not, the thunderhead turned and left, and the sun came back. Now I'm going to show you a video of a false charge, and this is about as aggressive a false charge that takes place. They come in all kinds of intensity, and the intensity is how you can read how disturbed the bear is over your actions. And I want to remind you that false charges, or any kind of display, whether it's chomping or huffing or all are good signs. There have been 67 human deaths by black bears in all of North America in the last 100 years. 85% of those have been caused by large males. 3% have been caused by females with cubs. And a few of them have been predatory. And a predatory black bear doesn't display at all. He stalks you just like a mountain lion. So being false charged is a good thing, even though it may scare you to death. And so I'm going to show this to you, not to scare you to death, but to desensitize you and let you realize how bears communicate. And I think they communicate this way because they communicate on a regular basis with strangers. And if you think about it, in your family, you could grunt and groan around and act only with emotion, and everybody would know what you were up to. But when you go out in the real world, you got to get it right. And for a bear to communicate with an unknown bear, it's a dangerous thing. So they have to have the ability to deceive and bluff, just like we do in the woods. The situation here is Squirty is the last National Geographic film. This is the last National Geographic film that we shot on Man Among Bears. And the film crew was pushing the limits with her, and she decided it was time for them to go home. That was her way of telling them to pack their bags and get out. Yeah. I shot that with a handheld camera. I've been false charged many times. I don't pay much attention to it. Now I want to show it to you again in slow motion. And this time, watch her expressions as they change. You'll see her eyes are very comfortable at first. She's focused on the crew. Nothing's a very big deal. And slowly her ears will begin to go back. And her face will get drawn out. Get an aggravated look. She will chomp, and then she'll go back into the relaxed state. And she's simply making a statement. And it's how bears communicate. And unfortunately, we take things literally. Bears are able to follow each other to find food and to follow each other to punish. Bears, wherever their fur touches any object, they leave scent that can be detected by another bear for up to 48 hours. A common way they find food is to follow each other, to find out where other bears are getting food, or even following back trails after they found the scat of a bear that got a meal. But they also have a judicial system. Any altruistic animal has to have a judicial system. They have to be able to have a way to keep the cheaters from prevailing and controlling the social behavior. And bears have a much better judicial system than we have. We have DNA and fingerprinting. We think it's pretty hot stuff. But we got to get that DNA and fingerprint off the perpetrator. We got to find it at the crime scene, and then we got to find the perpetrator again. And rarely do all those things come together. A bear, each and every bear has its own set of rules. And when another bear breaks its set of rules, he or she knows who broke its rules and can track them down and punish them at any given time. As an example, Squirty's adult granddaughter, 2, one evening had finished her small food reward and gone up and taken a nap. SQ2LO, that little sub-adult, came in and cleaned up the residuals. And there's a habit of these younger females pushing the buttons on the adult females, pushing the boundaries to find out where those boundaries are. And then she went off in the forest. 2 woke up and came down and noticed her residuals were gone and who took them. And she step by step tracked SQ2LO off in the forest to exact punishment. The punishment in bears is that they would like to bite, but it rarely happens. It's usually a chase. It's usually a chase because the subordinate bears are always lighter, faster, and can get further out than the dominant bears. There are also deliberate markers. The bear on the upper slide is sliding under a sapling, depositing sebaceous oil onto that sapling. The sebaceous oil is like our skin oil. It carries scent. It's long-lasting and large molecule and low volatility. They mark with it on purpose. You might argue that she's just sliding under a sapling and she's not marking on purpose. But in the second slide, that's a different bear, the same sapling. And she's now got the sapling over her back, and she's pulling it like this, making sure that every bit of sebaceous oil that she can get on there gets on there. The meaning of these marks is also based on context. So we can go into the woods and find bear sign, but we rarely know what it means because we don't know the context. Here's SQ2 tracking her mate during the mating season, trying to get back together with him after they were separated. He marked on this tree, so as she goes along, she detects his scent, marks over it, and pull back rubbing on the tree and continue to check to make sure that that was him. She'll detect everywhere his feet touch the ground, and then she'll do a stiff-legged walk, disrupting the soil below her feet, leaving a symbolic message. She can mark with little drops of urine saying who she is. And then finally she'll walk over a sapling, letting it pick up the scent from her underbelly, and then will flip up behind her, acting like an old factory antenna. So these bears are very busy communicating in the forest, and they very easily can get together with each other when they need. The most important reason the bears mark is to find their mates during the mating season. A female bear may know who she wants to mate with, but she's got to find him. She's been with her cubs for 18 months. And the male bears will advertise their presence at these red pine trees or telephone poles or novel objects in the forest like remote cabins and things like that. The male bear will back up to the tree, he'll flex his knees, and he'll rub that sebaceous oil into the porous bark of the tree. Then he'll rotate his head and bite the tree, like that light mark up on top of the tree there. And that releases the aromatic compounds in the sap, which will waffle off and attract other bears to its mark. The bears will be advertisers as well. And when the female wants to find the male, she'll go out and check out these trees until she locates the tree of the male she wants to mate with. She'll rub on the tree and wait nearby. He'll come back and they'll get out of dodge because there'll be an entourage of sub-adult males that follow the big male around, mentoring off him, not by his choice. And wherever the female bear goes, and wherever she stops to feed, the male bear will set up a 2-acre territory around her, where he'll back up on multiple trees. He'll do a stiff-legged walk, leaving a trail of sunken footprints, warning other bears that she's been taken. And meanwhile, her condition of estrus will be waffling out there on the airways. Here's a 350-pound male back rubbing as he travels with the female during the mating season. More recently, I've been studying a different kind of bear. Starting in 2008, I started consulting with the Chinese at the Chengdu Panda Base about the reintroduction of captively bred pandas. I returned in 2012 and presented my work to them both times, and they were still having some reservations about using the methods that I used with black bear cubs. They were worried that if they tried to walk panda cubs, the cubs would simply run off and they'd lose these million-dollar animals. They were also fearful that the wild pandas would come and attack the researchers, and they wouldn't be able to safely work in the forest with the pandas. They visited Debbie and I for an extended weekend later in June of 2012. We were able to take them for a walk with 6 of the bottle-fed cubs loose in the forest. The cubs paid no attention to us. They were exploring plants and hornets' nests. And we took them to one of these bear mark trees with bear scent on it, and each of the cubs climbed and sniffed and then came off and did that stiff-legged walk. Hu Rong, who's the director of science and research at the Chengdu Panda Base, exclaimed that they can communicate with the wild bears without even meeting them. She got very excited. The cubs followed us back to the cage, and we walked into the cage, and they all ran in behind us back into the enclosure. We have an 8-acre forested enclosure that we raised the cubs in. And so they left back to Drexel, where they were learning English. And we now have started the project in China. We have our first 2 panda cubs that we're working with. We've got a postdoc on the ground who's there 24/7. We're working out protocols. And the first part of the process is teaching the Chinese. The culture is very different. We've run into surprising obstacles, things we hadn't anticipated. We found that most of the keepers and biologists don't really have empathy for animals. They have treated animals like objects, and the animals don't respond to them. Our postdoc, the animals love. Adult pandas, which they think are terribly dangerous, the adult females will lower their heads so they can be scratched and lick his hand. They're very different things, but they've been without pets for several generations. So they really haven't grown up with the access to animals that we have in this country. So we have a lot of challenges ahead of us, but this project is going to go on with a new set of cubs every year for the foreseeable future. To end up tonight, I have a quick visual. I call it Houdini's apple tree gymnastics. Moving on.
Wow.
Finally, is dismount. Thank you very much. Anybody has questions? I'd be happy to take them at this time. Yeah.
I had a quick question about the feeding habits. You mentioned some like to feed on ants and others are after hornets. Is there any evidence that they might pass some of those skills on to their family? Or is it just all's fair game and the one to eat hornets will just the same ants?
The question was about individuals eating ants or hornets. But the reality is they all eat both. They instinctively as cubs, get terribly excited when they find ants or hornets. And even as cubs, they might not be able to tolerate the stings. They still get very excited, and they still go back over and over and over again. They just run off through the bushes every time things get hot. Yes.
So how long does the cub stay with the mother before she kicks it out?
Cub stays for 18 months. Yeah. And then he's ready to be on his own. They've developed enough to travel a while.
She's ready to mate.
Yeah, well, she will be in she needs 6 months to fatten up. She mates in June, but then she needs to get fat enough to give birth to cubs. So she'll put on a lot of weight before going to bed. Yes?
I was going to ask.
Is by telephone calls. I have one at my camp. It's been bitten twice in the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's...
And it's, I'm 6'2". I'm standing up, it's this high off the ground.
That's most likely a male during the mating season. But females will usually well, they usually stand about, the adult male will be 6'5", standing on his hind legs. So his bite, and the bites are coming sideways like this. And again, he's releasing those aromatic compounds. The telephone bowls are red pine, made of red pine and treated with creosote, which is an aromatic compound. So they're ideal for marking.
Things are pretty big chunks.
Yeah. Well, they'll tip them over in the back.
I was going to ask, when the bear is eating these hornets, and they'll get them around their face and drive them off, but when they're eating them, are they, the sting in their throat and their tongue doesn't bother them at all? Or?
It doesn't bother them, and they have a much more leathery type of tissue inside their mouth. We have this very tender epithelial tissue. Bears is, they can eat jack in the pulpit, which has calcium oxalate crystals. We, Jack would call it, it will burn for a week. It's about 100 times hotter than horseradish. Bear can chop it right down without any problem. Yeah.
We weren't close enough. We were like, the wall was there and we were inside the house. Well, we happened to watch a black bear. We live in Deerfield, right across from Bearbrook State Park. So every so often we get company. But we had one feeder that was there, the feeder that, you know, the chipmunks weren't supposed to get in, so we had sunflower seeds. We have him on tape. He was the most beautiful and fun playing bear. He took the feeder off, and he must have played with it for a good half hour, and he got all the seeds. It was so funny to see him. He was like playing with it, like a toy.
Try to keep these for questions, not stories.
But he was cute, wasn't he?
Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you very much for coming, and you are the man of the wilderness. But what even inspires me more is what I just read, is that you have dyslexia.
Yes.
And you've overcome that to do what you do with no political repercussions because it's independent. Could you talk about that?
Well, it took me a long time to come to grips with it. I tried to conform for literally 40 years of my life. And as a gunsmith, I could design all kinds of things. I can do three-dimensional design in my head. I could change angles, I could rotate, I could run mechanisms. And then when I wanted to show somebody what I did, I'd have to build it. I'd have to make a prototype. And I could usually build it the first time around. And I had a couple customers of mine that were professors at the Thayer School of Engineering, and they saw what I was doing, and they said, well, you know, you ought to come and try to get an engineering degree. And I got accepted as a special student, and then they put me into calculus, physics, and computer programming, and quickly flunked me out of the process. But in the process, they told me I would have to be tested, and I wasn't aware of dyslexia, or I grew up at a time when it wasn't talked about, and it was kind of mainstream. And when I got tested, I found out I had a very high IQ, in top 1%, and I read at a third grade level. And the lady just looked at me and said, boy, you're going to turn out interesting. And
You have.
at that point, when I realized that, you know, trying to conform and learn and you know, function with mathematics and all that other stuff I couldn't do, I just decided that I would just stick to what I was doing, and ever since then I've been successful. And it's just disregarding convention and doing what I was raised to do.
That's an inspiration right there. Thank you.
I'm an outdoorsman, a fly fisherman, that sort of thing. I see a lot of bears and moose and a variety of other animals. And a lot of people just are deathly afraid of everything. The question is, how many attacks in New Hampshire, or recent attacks, or whatever, to my knowledge, has been family?
Well, the last person killed in New Hampshire was in 1780. And recently there have been some incidents that might be considered attacks. And they've been people getting scratched or pushed by a bear, and they've all involved a dog. People letting their dog out, the dog tangles with the bear, and then the person tries to rescue the dog from the bear. That's not advisable. Bears and dogs can work it out. They're not necessarily going to harm the dog unless the bear has been bit aggressively a number of times. I had a call from one of my neighbors who called me in a bit of a panic, and she said a bear just was going after my dog in the yard and mauled my dog. And she said I opened the door and the dog ran in, and she said it didn't have a mark on it. And she said, I went out and looked above the bird feeder. Of course, there's the bird feeder. That's the classic problem. If there wasn't a bird feeder, there wouldn't be a bear. And there were 2 tiny cubs up the tree. But she wasn't going to harm the dog. She just softballed it. So it's not every case.
I've never had problems, I see them all the time, I don't. I've never had a problem, and my feeling is, they know you're there, you're not gonna know they're there, they're not.
Yeah. No, the bears are afraid of people. And, you know, we walk through the woods like we own the place. We're stomping around, breaking sticks, all the animals flee. You know, if you want to see an animal, you got to sit down and be quiet for at least 20 minutes before things start to move again. I mean, we literally terrify the forest. And bears are afraid of it. The only those that encounters, you know, that sudden encounter when you're walking on a quiet trail, you know, that can get a little exciting. But again, if you think there are bears around, walk off trail. If you break a stick, that's the universal alarm sign. All animals disappear.
I was just going to really quickly ask you, you have so much expertise in black bears. Have you ever compared the black bear with other varieties of bears and seen some similarities or huge differences?
Well, I don't have much access to grizzlies or polar bears, but I have friends who do study them. And there's a lot of similarities. They're different in the niche that they live. The grizzly bear is more dangerous than the black bear, and most of the human deaths and attacks by grizzly bears are mothers in defense of cubs. And black bears, they can hide. Black bear gets behind one bush, its background color is gone. And they're not aggressive for that reason. Grizzly bear is an animal of the open plain. So it's out in the open, it's exposed, and she may respond to a human at 200 yards off. You know, her false guard might be 150 yards. Sometimes they make contact closer. So they're more dangerous, but still the deaths by grizzly bears are not extraordinary. They're still some of the lowest causes of human death that exist. There was 17,359 dog attacks in the United States last year. That's why when the insurance guy comes to your house and sees your mutt, your insurance rates go up. So, you know, we face things that we're used to that are nowhere near as dangerous as
Does the tracking device that the collar they wear, does that ever hinder them in any way?
There's a rule on putting telemetry on any animal is that it can't exceed 5% of the animal's body weight. Those collars are about 2.5 pounds, so they're about 1% of the bear's weight. Squirty, I've never sedated her to put a collar on her. I have to bribe her. I use Oreo cookies to bribe her. But she sticks her neck out and she lets me put the collar on. So if it was a big hindrance, she certainly wouldn't tolerate me putting the collar on.
You were diagnosed with dyslexia later in life. Looking back, given everything that you've done, what advice could you give to a young person that might know they're dyslexic if they were maybe interested in pursuing some type of a career? I mean, what could they do now that dyslexia is it's known, it wasn't before?
Well, I was initially tested very young, but there was nothing they could do about it through the mainstream. But today, if you know about it, you have the advantage. My advice is to use your own skills and to perfect them, but always understand that it's important to read to get further information. I don't read novels because I'm not a fluent reader, but I read everything I can find. As slow as I read, I still read to find out what other people have written about the kind of work, and I stick everything to what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in sports or politics or all these things that fly through my head and don't stick. I build a core of understanding and I stick everything to. And that way I have a much stronger understanding than other people might have. I also, I think in pictures, which I believe gives me big advantages, because when I wrote Among the Dares, that was written out right out of my field notes, and I'd go out for 9 hours, and I'd pay attention to everything that was important to me. I'd come back and write my field notes. I wouldn't take any notes in the field. And I'd simply turn a video on in my head and re-walk the walk. And I could see in vivid detail everything I saw when I walked the walk. So we have advantages, we have abilities that other people don't have. Teachers often don't understand dyslexic kids because they teach to their experience. They think everybody in the classroom thinks just like they do. And I think all of us think that. We may go through most of our life before we realize that other people think differently.
So when you say that you keep things that you're interested in, and so in this case, you read everything there is on bears?
Well, I build everything, my core understanding comes from my own observations.
Okay.
And everything is stuck on that.
So
I don't trust other people.
Good for you.
But what I'm trying to find out, I guess, is would it be the interest in the bears, or is it the interest in?
For me, it's in the interest in how things work. That's why my gun designing and mechanical and gunsmithing was all as fascinating to me. And my processes were exactly the same. It didn't make any difference to me. But what I found is that because I'm not a good reader, the written material or the work of others that's out there is not accurate enough for me to read and make sense of it. You have to be a really good reader to go through the pile of stuff, especially with the internet that's now available. The quality of the information that we deal with is terribly poor. But if you think about it, if you're observing it firsthand, that's how we were designed to take in information. That's the only information